Hi, welcome to Dynamics Accounting and Finance Tips. My name is Jolie. Today we're going to be talking about accounts payable payment proposal automation. This is really fun functionality because this takes a normal process that most users probably do every week or every day, the same process, and it automates it. Let's jump into it. So I'm going to point out a few things. This is the AP invoice journal. Let's go to AP payment journal. So we're in the demo environment. We'll kind of clean this up and we'll go into accounts payable and under payments, so I'm going to collapse this, but under payments, we have the vendor payment journal. So this is typically something that a user will go into once a week, once a day. Some companies actually make vendor payments daily. And they're going in and they're going to the journal and they're creating a new journal and they're going to the lines and they're creating a payment proposal and they're putting in criteria. And depending on that criteria, whether it be by due date, by method of payment, by vendor group, it is going to pull in the vendor invoices that are due to pay. And that process, depending on how many transactions come in, can be a time consuming process because it might take the system a while to process those transactions. So what the automation does is creates this journal ahead of time before the user even wakes up in the morning. And so that's what we're going to set up today with some criteria tips that I want to show you. And before we start that, let's talk about how to activate this feature. It is a new feature, so let's just type in, and this is for your admin. Let's go to feature management. It was a new feature added in 2020, so we would go to all. And here you can search for payment proposal automation. See if we can find. And then it'd pull up the vendor payment proposal automation feature added in 2020. And just if it's not enabled already, you would have to come over here and enable it. I like how Microsoft puts a description, a brief description of what this automation will do, because I looked up the word cyclical. It means reoccurring. So organizations that have a cyclical schedule for vendor payments can now automate the payment proposal process. That's what we're going to do today. Okay, before we move on to the automation, here is something. These are all the open vendor invoices for this demo environment. I want you to notice a few things. One is that we don't have any other form of payment besides check on the transaction level. Two, I want to point out that this last vendor, this is a Fabricum supplier. I actually, in this situation, the vendor was getting paid check, but called and got approval from our finance department. And this is obviously theoretical. I'm making this up, but it's something that could happen. And they called our finance team and they want to be paid by ACH. And so they have actually got approval to get an electronic payment. And if you go to their master record under payment, method of payment, they now have electronic payment method. Well, we cannot change the transaction from method of payment check. I'm going to show you how we're going to address that when we are setting up our criteria in our automations. Also want to point out that we have some vendor groups. So this vendor group is parts vendor, 40 is, hover over that, other vendors. So we're going to pull our data, our filtering by vendor groups. You can do it however is beneficial for your company. Okay, let's jump into automation. So over in accounts payable, under payment setup, we are going to go to process automations. I'm going to favorite it because it is a favorite of mine. We're going to go into process automations and we're going to set up our new automation. So our schedule type would be the only one that's there. Company would be our current company. and we're going to create the series, and we're going to call this weekly check run. And you can simply call it whatever beneficial to you. It's going to be in the description under your automation. So you probably, if you have a separate ACH, or if you're paying international vendors separate from domestic vendors by vendor type, then I would definitely put some description in there. Owner would probably be the person who's creating this. And we're going to schedule this to run in about 15 minutes because I want to show you the end result. And start date would be 8/15. We do not have to put an end date here. However, for this example, we are just going to end it tomorrow. We would do weekly because we want to do this every Monday or every Wednesday. For this example, we're going to say we want this done every Wednesday. And this is going to be a batch run every Wednesday. If we have any errors, we want to be alerted and emailed. And so the journal name is going to be the same as the payment journal. Select invoices by. So typically we would do due date, but you can do cash discount date or due date and cash discount date. Now this is interesting. If we don't toggle define to date criteria, it's going to pull everything that's due up until that date when that batch is run. So if it's run on today's date, which is August 15th, it is going to pull everything that's due up to August 15th. And so here we can define date criteria. So if we want to say, okay, we want to run our payment runs on Wednesday, but we actually want to pull everything that's due up until Friday, then we would want to add 2 more days here so that not only will it pull up to Wednesday, but 2 days after Wednesday as well. Now here, we are going to define the payment date. So if I'm running my payments again on August 15th, my check date will be August 15th. If I want my check date to be different, so for example, if I want my August 14th to post as a check date of August 14th and August 13th as a check date of August 13th, then I would want to put -2. And then what it'll do is it'll have the 15th, the 14th, and the 13th with 3 different payment days. So anything that's due up until the 13th would have the 13th posting date and the 14th and 15th. Typically, if I'm cutting checks on a specific day, I want that check date to be the same day. So I would probably leave this toggled no. You have an amount limit. If you want to only pay invoices up to a certain limit amount, where for this example, our currency is the US dollar. Payment weekday is going to be every Wednesday, and our offset account would always be bank, in this case, our operating account. This defined summarized payment date is very similar to this defined minimum payment date here. The only difference is if you are a company who totals your invoices and your method of payment is set up in that manner. So let's go to method of payment. I'm going to show you what I mean. So method of payment, check total, is going to take one vendor, and if you have several invoices, so for example, AT&T, if you have several invoices for AT&T, it's going to total it into one payment. Yes, one payment for that whole vendor. So if you have summarized payments and you want a different payment date for those summarized payments, you would simply do the same thing. I would say, again, if you want your check date to be the date that you run your batches, I would leave this toggled no. Check vendor balances is good. The definition, I actually have this written down for us. The definition of check vendor balance from Microsoft says, if this option is set to yes, The system verifies that a vendor doesn't have a debit balance before any invoice is paid. If a vendor does have a debit balance, no payment is created. We want this. We only want to pay credit balance invoices, and for vendors, that means not a credit invoice from the vendor. So, how do I put that? These are actually invoices that we owe the vendor, not that they owe us. So we want that. Delete negative payments works a little differently per Microsoft, depending on whether payments are made for individual invoices or for the sum of invoices that meet the payment criteria. So again, it's going to not allow a total. So if you have a total of 5 invoices and all of those invoices, one of them is a regular invoice that we owe the vendor, so maybe $10,000 we owe the vendor, but we have a credit invoice that the vendor owes us for $12,000. So at the end of the day, it's going to be a debit. This would not allow that to happen. No debit vendor payments, which is exactly what we want. So I would say check both of those to yes. And centralized payments is including vendor invoices from other legal entities. So we're going to say no here. Okay, so now we are ready to do our filtering. So I'm going to open this up under filter. And here is where we can talk a little bit about method of payment. So method of payment out of the box shows transactions. I don't like this because if, like that example I gave you earlier, if you have a vendor who changes their method of payment, it is not going to be captured here. So what you can do is you can pull the method of payment from the vendor record. So method of payment, and here we're going to do an ACH method of payment here in a second for this one vendor down here, this Fabricum supplier. I would expect that we should get them separately. They should not be on this payment run. Our currency will always be USD unless you are doing exchange in a different country. So we actually don't have to define this here. But I want to also say we can put in vendor types. So account type is really helpful if it's domestic or international. Oh, sorry about that. I think it's vendor type down here. Yeah, vendor type. Domestic, foreign, individual. This is a really good way to filter as well as group. Now, one thing I saw here is it's not vendor group, it's actually just group. A little confusing, but just group. And here we can say, okay, we want to run a badge every day for our parts vendors, but only every week for our service vendors. So a lot of functionality and changes for this payment proposal. But for this example, we're going to say, give us all vendors, check. And for this example, it should be everything here. So amount not settled, everything less than, oh, yeah, everything here should be paid when we run this batch. Okay, so we are going to hit OK. And did I set this time up? Let's go back to the time here, 2:15. So let's run this for 2:18 and make sure our filtering is still good. Okay, we are going to finish this. And now it's going to run. I'm going to show you the results. So I love how I look at this and I see that no occurrence has been created. Let me show you why. I'm going to go ahead and edit this. And nothing is set to run because I'm telling it not to run till Wednesday. Let's get it to run today. And let's change this time to 2:20. Every Monday. Okay, so now we're saying, and now we have a scheduled payment proposal run. I'm going to show you how to see the results. And yeah, we're going to see this live in action. So 220, and this payment proposal has been completed. We can actually see the payments from here. Takes us right to the payment journal, and we can see the payment journal ready to go and ready to be paid. Now I want to compare this back to our open vendor invoices just to make sure. So when I go back, my total is actually different, but because my method of payment has some blank fields, and if I just say begins with check, I do get the 81,000. Keep in mind, those blank fields should be pulling in. So let's go to one of these blanks and go to the vendor account. And this vendor account does not have a method of payment. I'm going to show you how to resolve that as well. Let's go back. And let's just point out that without the transactions, based on the criteria we asked it to pull in, it is an exact match. Now the user just needs to review and then generate the payments. This can be ran at any time. I would recommend doing this in the mornings before the user comes in. If we go back to, let's go back to the automations. And so this will continue to run on a weekly or daily, however you set it up, until you disable it or delete it. But we're going to set up a new payment proposal. And we're going to do weekly blank method of payments. Now, this is probably one that will have to be reviewed, but it will give you an idea which transactions and which vendors need to be corrected. So I would schedule this time. We're going to schedule it for 2:25 p.m. Today, we're going to end it. We're just going to do one. We're going to do daily, although this would probably be weekly. Let's give us an alert if there's any errors. And let's do the journal name. No criteria, just because we want to go ahead and get this set up. I'm going to say today, offset account bank. We don't want any negative payments. And here is where we're going to tell it, well, under vendors, method of payment, give me blank. That's all we want to do. And we want to finish. So this is set for 2:25. So that is, let's refresh, scheduled. And let's set up one more. Let's do that ACH, that one that we changed ACH. So weekly or daily, however you want to do this. I will do daily. Daily ACH payment. And we'll schedule this one for, again, we can do this for 7 a.m. every morning before the user comes in. And payment journal. We'll leave everything the same here, USD, payment weekday. And we have to have all of this. Check vendor balance, we definitely want both of those. And filter, we want to say, give me method of payment for electronic payments. Okay, and we want to save this criteria. Oh, did not let me save it. No. Well, disregard that. Okay, so now we have several scheduled transactions. We have one at 2:25, so this one should be completed. And let's see the results. Now when we go to view payments, this was everything without a method of payment. So this would be really good for someone to review why these aren't pulling a method of payment from this vendor. And then you can easily change these method of payments here. I can actually show you a way to change these really quickly. So we could actually edit invoices for selective payment and go in here and do a multiple change if we wanted to pay them all by check, and then select OK. And now all those method of payments would be check. Perfect. And now we are ready to pay them. Oh, did I hit cancel? I hit cancel. You'd have to select OK. So let's try that really quick one more time. Edit invoices, multiple change. Well, it did look like it went through. Method of payment. Yeah. Well, those actually have been changed. Interestingly enough, they were part of this. As you can see, every single invoice now has method of payment as check. So it did work on the updating the method of payment. Let's go back to review our ACH. So if we go back here to ACH and we view the payments, here's the one that Fabricam Supplier, who last minute told us he no longer wanted to be paid check, he wanted to be paid ACH. So what happened is the system did pull his invoices, even though the transaction said check, the vendor payment pulled ACH. Now, you will have to go update these method of payments here because they are pulling based on the transactions. And you would go and you would select multiple change the method of payment to be electronic payment, and then if you have a payment specification, and then select, I typically like to change my payment date to today as well, and then select OK. Yep, update is the best thing to do. Once you hit that update button, you can see my method of payment is now all electronic, and we can generate payments. This is the functionality of the AP or accounts payable payment journal automation. I hope you enjoyed this. This is so much fun. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop me a comment. And I have come up with an ending way to end my videos. Never stop learning, never stop growing, and always be grateful. See ya.